see, there is something shifting in the consciousness of those who walk the spiritual path. Something quiet, something that most people have not noticed yet, but it is happening. There is a specific group of people who are no longer afraid of judgment. They are not resisting it. They are not defending themselves against it. They are simply unmoved by it. And if you have felt this strange indifference yourself, if you have found yourself caring less and less about what others think of your choices, your beliefs, your way of being, then what I am about to tell you may bring you great relief. This is not arrogance. This is not disconnection from reality. This is not spiritual bypassing or emotional numbness. No, this is something else entirely. This is what happens when you wake up to the nature of judgment itself. Let me explain what I mean by this fearlessness that is quietly spreading among those who see clearly. I am not talking about becoming cold or indifferent to people. I am not talking about building walls around yourself or pretending that you do not care. I am talking about that moment when you finally see judgment for what it really is. Not a reflection of your worth, not a measurement of your truth, but a projection of the inner world of the person who is judging. It is like watching a movie. When you are inside the theater, absorbed in the story, you believe everything you see on the screen is real. You forget that you are sitting in a dark room watching light projected onto a wall. You forget that none of it can actually touch you. This is how most people experience judgment. They believe it is real. They believe it has power. They believe it can define them, diminish them, destroy them. But the moment you wake up, everything changes. Suddenly you are like someone who has stood up in the theater and turned around. You see the projector. You see the light beam. You see that what appeared on the screen was never about you at all. It was always about the person holding the projector. This is what is happening to the spiritually awaked. They are not becoming arrogant or superior. They are simply seeing clearly. They are seeing that judgment is nothing more than another person's interpretation of reality, filtered through their fears, their wounds, their conditioning, their limited perception. When you are asleep yourself, this is no problem. You accept judgment as truth. You adjust yourself to fit the opinions of others. You spend your energy defending, explaining, justifying, proving. But the moment you wake up, you realize something profound. You realize that no one can see you truly except through the lens of their own consciousness. And most people are looking through a very cloudy lens. Society operates on a kind of agreement. An agreement that we will all pretend that external validation matters more than internal knowing. An agreement that we will seek approval, fear disapproval, and organize our entire lives around the opinions of people who do not even know themselves. And for those who are still asleep, this agreement feels normal, natural, necessary. But for those who have awakened, participation in this agreement becomes impossible. Not because they want to rebel, not because they are trying to be different, but because they can no longer pretend that judgment has the power everyone claims it has. So what exactly do the spiritually awake see that others do not? What is this shift in perception that makes judgment lose its power? They can see that when someone judges them, that person is actually revealing their own inner landscape. They can see that criticism is almost always a confession. They can see that what disturbs someone else about your behavior is usually what they have repressed in themselves. They can see that judgment is nothing but the ego, trying to maintain its sense of superiority by finding fault in others. They can see that every opinion someone holds about you is shaped by their past experiences, their traumas, their beliefs, their culture, their family conditioning. They can see that no one is looking at you objectively. Everyone is looking at you through the filter of their own story. And once you see this, you can not unsee it. You cannot go back to believing that someone else's opinion is more valid than your own inner knowing. You cannot go back to arranging your life around the comfort of people who are not even comfortable with themselves. You can not go back to performing, pretending, shape-shifting just to avoid disapproval. Because now you understand something fundamental. You understand that if you change yourself to please someone, they will still find something to judge. If you defend yourself against their criticism, you are validating the idea that their criticism matters. If you seek their approval, you are handing them power over your peace. The awakened person sees that judgment is a game they cannot win, so they stop playing, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with a quiet, clear understanding that participating in this game requires them to betray themselves. And that betrayal costs more than any judgment ever could. Every conversation where they must filter their truth to avoid judgment. Every interaction where they must diminish their light to make others comfortable. Every moment where they must pretend to care about opinions that have nothing to do with their actual path. It all becomes exhausting, depleting, suffocating, and eventually the soul says enough. The soul withdraws its energy from the game. The soul chooses authenticity over acceptance. The soul chooses inner peace over external validation. This is not rebellion. This is alignment. This is what happens when you finally understand that freedom is not about being free from judgment. Freedom is about being free from the need for judgment to be absent. Now, I want to be very clear about something. This is not arrogance. This is not spiritual ego pretending to be above human connection. This is not some cold detachment where you look down on others and dismiss their feelings. No, this is something else entirely. This is wisdom. This is clarity. This is the natural result of seeing through the illusion that kept you trapped in a cycle of seeking approval and fearing rejection. The spiritually awake do not fear judgment anymore because they have seen its true nature. And once you see the mechanism behind something, it can no longer control you. It is like discovering that the monster you feared in the dark was just a coat hanging on a door. You do not feel superior for not being afraid anymore. You just see clearly. And seeing clearly removes the fear, naturally. The awakened person has simply stopped giving their power away to opinions that were never about them in the first place. They have stopped treating other people's projections as if they were truth. They have stopped letting the unhealed wounds of others dictate their own sense of worth. So you make a choice. You choose to live from your own inner authority rather than the external opinions of others. You choose to trust your own knowing more than you fear their judgment. And this is when the fearlessness begins to show itself in your daily life. First, you stop explaining yourself. You stop over-justifying your choices to people who have already decided what they think about you. Not with anger or defensiveness, but with a quiet understanding that your truth does not require their approval to be valid. You realize that explanation is often just another form of seeking permission, and you no longer need permission to be yourself. Then you stop defending yourself against criticism. Someone says something harsh about your path, your beliefs, your way of living. And instead of feeling that familiar panic, that need to correct them, to prove them wrong, to make them understand, you simply let it pass through you. You recognize their words as their story, not your truth. You do not absorb it. You do not carry it. You do not even argue with it, because you understand that their judgment cannot touch what is real in you. Then you stop performing for acceptance. You stop adjusting your words to avoid disapproval. You stop dimming your light to make others comfortable. You stop pretending to be less than you are or different than you are just to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. Not because you want to be difficult, but because the cost of pretending has become greater than the cost of being rejected. And finally, you stop fearing the loss of relationships built on conditional acceptance. You realize that any connection that requires you to abandon yourself is not a connection worth keeping. You understand that people who truly see you will not judge you, and people who judge you have never truly seen you. So you release your grip on relationships that only existed because you were willing to shrink, and you trust that the right people will find you when you stop hiding. And here is what happens in that space. Here is what unfolds when you stop living for the approval of others and start living from your own truth. You enter a period of deep inner transformation. a period that might look like isolation from the outside, but feels like liberation from the inside. You begin to hear yourself again, your own voice, your own intuition, your own desires, all the things that were drowned out by the constant noise of other people's opinions, other people's expectations, other people's fears about who you should be. Now there is silence, and in that silence you start to remember who you actually are, beneath all the conditioning. Who is it? You begin to trust yourself in ways you never could before, because you are no longer checking every decision against what others might think. You are no longer second-guessing your knowing because it does not match someone else's version of right. You are simply listening inward and moving according to what feels true. And the more you do this, the stronger that inner voice becomes. You begin to feel a kind of peace that does not depend on external circumstances. A peace that is not shaken when someone disapproves. A peace that remains steady even when you are misunderstood, criticized, or rejected. Because this peace is not coming from being accepted. It is coming from accepting yourself. It is coming from alignment with your own soul. You begin to notice that the people who do remain in your life are different now. They are not there because you performed for them. They are there because they recognize something real in you. They do not need you to be anything other than what you are. And this kind of relationship, this kind of connection feels completely different from what you knew before. It feels spacious, honest, alive, and you begin to understand that this fearlessness is not something you created, it is something you uncovered. It was always there, underneath the layers of conditioning that taught you to fear judgment. Underneath the wounds that made you believe other people's opinions mattered more than your own truth. You did not become fearless. You simply remembered that fear of judgment was never yours to begin with. Now let me tell you what is really happening here. Let me tell you the deeper truth that most people miss about judgment, and why the spiritually awake are no longer controlled by it. Judgment only has power when you believe you need something from the person who is judging you. Think about that for a moment. When someone criticizes you and it does not affect you at all, what is different? It is not that their words were kinder. It is that you were not seeking anything from them. You were not looking for their validation, their approval, their acceptance. And so their judgment had nothing to grab onto. It simply passed by. But when judgment hurts, when it shakes you, when it keeps you awake at night, it is because some part of you is still hoping that person will see you differently. Some part of you is still trying to earn their respect, their love, their acknowledgement. And as long as you need something from them, their judgment will have the power to wound you. The spiritually awake have released this need, not because they no longer desire connection, but because they understand that real connection cannot exist where judgment lives. They understand that trying to be seen by someone who is determined to misunderstand you is like trying to fill a cup that has no bottom. It is endless, exhausting, impossible. So they stop trying, they stop needing, they stop hoping that external validation will ever bring the peace that only comes from within. And the moment they stop needing, judgment loses its grip. It becomes just noise. Just someone else's opinion, just a passing cloud in a sky that remains untouched. This is the secret. This is what changes everything. When you stop needing approval, disapproval cannot harm you. When you stop fearing rejection, rejection cannot control you. When you stop believing that someone else's perception of you is more important than your own knowing, you become free. Not free from judgment, free from the belief that judgment matters. So if fear of judgment is gone, what takes its place? What fills that space where anxiety and people-pleasing used to live? Compassion, but not the kind of compassion that excuses harmful behavior or tolerates disrespect. A clear-eyed compassion that sees why people judge without taking that judgment personally. You begin to see that the person criticizing you is often in pain, that their harsh words are coming from their own unhealed places, that their need to judge you is actually their need to feel better about themselves. And when you see this, something softens in you, not weakness, not submission, but understanding. You no longer take their judgment as a statement about your worth. You see it as information about their inner state, and you can feel compassion for that, without needing to fix it, without needing to defend yourself against it, without needing to make them see differently. Clarity also takes the place of fear, a deep clarity about who you are and what you are here to do. The spiritually awake are not confused about their path anymore. They are not waiting for permission. They are not looking for consensus. They know what is true for them, and that knowing is stronger than any opinion someone else might hold. This clarity acts like a shield, not a defensive shield that keeps people out, but a shield of certainty that keeps confusion out. When someone judges your choices, you do not spiral into self-doubt because your clarity is unshakable. You simply recognize that they are seeing through their lens, and you are living through yours. And both can exist without conflict. Freedom also replaces the fear, a freedom so profound that you can hardly believe you lived without it for so long. Freedom to speak your truth without rehearsing it first. Freedom to make choices based on your inner guidance rather than external expectation. Freedom to disappoint people without collapsing under the weight of their disappointment. Freedom to be misunderstood without desperately trying to make yourself understood. You become what I call present, but not absorbed. You can move through the world, interact with people, participate in life, but you are no longer absorbed by the drama of who approves and who does not. You are here, you are engaged, but you are not controlled by the reactions of others. So if you are feeling this shift happening in you, if you are noticing that judgment no longer shakes you the way it used to, if you are finding yourself caring less about what others think and more about what feels true, if you are discovering a quiet fearlessness that you did not have to force or fake, then listen to what I am about to tell you. This is not a problem. This is not something to fix or suppress or feel guilty about. This is your soul remembering its own authority. This is your consciousness expanding beyond the need for external validation. This is evolution happening within you, and you do not need to apologize for it. Do not fight this shift. Do not try to go back to caring about opinions that no longer resonate with your truth. Do not force yourself to seek approval from people whose approval you have outgrown. That version of you who needed everyone to understand, who needed everyone to accept, who needed everyone to validate your path, that version served its purpose. But you are not that person anymore. Give yourself permission to live without the weight of judgment. Give yourself permission to disappoint people who expected you to stay small. Give yourself permission to be misunderstood by those who are not meant to understand you. This is not cruelty. This is honesty. This is integrity. This is what it means to honor your own evolution. And understand something important. This fearlessness is not permanent, in the sense that you will never feel anything again. You will still feel, you will still care about certain people and certain things, but you will not be ruled by the fear of judgment anymore. You will not organize your entire life around avoiding disapproval. You will not betray yourself just to keep the peace with people who are not at peace with themselves. You will return to the world when you are ready, but you will return different. You will return sovereign. You will return clear. You will return as someone who knows their own worth and does not need it reflected back by others to believe it. And the world needs this version of you far more than it needs the version that was trying to please everyone. So use this time well. Use this fearlessness to explore who you really are beneath the masks you wore for approval. Use it to discover what you actually want, rather than what you were told to want. Use it to build a life that reflects your truth, rather than their expectations. Because this is not the end of your journey. This is the beginning. You are not abandoning anyone. You are pioneering a way of being that others will follow when they are ready. You are showing that it is possible to live without fear of judgment. And that in itself is a gift to everyone still trapped in that fear.